and welcome to Australia Wide. I'm Yasmin Abdelmajid. What an impact music has, and we'll tell you just how important it can be later in the show.
Music therapy is used around Australia quite widely in lots of different situations. When you play the right music to someone with dementia, for example, then music restores their personality, their functioning.
Also this week, what makes a refugee? Inside one woman's battle for recognition. And a camping trip with a difference.
Remember that time when we went out bush and we caught that quail and we went out and looked for all the bush food? I want them to actually feel the same way I do, so that when they're old enough they can bring their children out, teach them and show them the same things that my parents taught me.
But first, they're the homegrown sheepskin slippers that took the world by storm. Yet their famous nickname, Ugg boots, is a fiercely protected trademark owned by a US fashion giant. Now, a Western Sydney bootmaker says he has evidence that Ugg is stolen Aussie lingo, and he's taking his claim back to court. Anne Barker reports.
Eddie Oiger fell in love with Ugg boots as a kid.
At the age of 11, I got my first pair of Ugg boots. I begged my mum for a pair.
And before long, Ugg boots had become Eddie's life. When he left school, he trained as a tanner, working with skins and hides. By 19, he was making and selling sheepskin boots.
They were ugly boots. They were ugly, but they were, if you didn't have one, you weren't part of the crowd.
From those early days as surfwear, Ugg boots became an Australian fashion icon. Today they're a luxury product sold around the world. Eddie Oiger's factory alone sells 50,000 pairs a year, but he's banned from using the word Ugg overseas.
We got about 190 styles now, and we supply many shops here in Sydney and Australia-wide. We sell a lot on the internet. But unfortunately, we have to compete in Australia and we can't export our products out.
Despite its Australian origins, the Ugg trademark is American-owned. Footwear giant Deckers sells $1 billion worth of Ugg boots a year worldwide and fiercely protects its brand.
It affected the whole industry, that no one can sell it into the US or anywhere else in the world because apparently they've got it registered in about 130 countries around the world.
Deckers has already sued 2 Australian bootmakers. Now it's suing Australian Leather in the US District Court in Chicago, alleging it's illegally sold Ugg boots in America. But suddenly the tables have turned on Deckers. The Aussie bootmaker is counter-suing the multinational, alleging the Ugg trademark was based on a falsehood and should never have been granted.
Deckers alleged that Eddie breached the trademarks in the US. So what we're alleging now is that the trademarks in the US are actually invalid, that they've been obtained through alleged fraud. And if we can establish that case, then we're going to be seeking an order from the court that they be invalidated.
So in 1978, a surf buddy and I brought 6 pairs of boots in from Australia to start our own business and surf.
The legal case relies on this book by Australian entrepreneur Brian Smith, who first registered the Ugg trademark in the US. At the time, Smith declared there was no significance of the word Ugg in the relevant trade or industry, but his autobiography tells a different story.
He's sort of saying that he was the first person to think of the word Ugg in America, when in actual fact he recognised in his book that the word Ugg was a very, very big thing. It's a big thing in Australia, and he wanted to bring that to America to make a lot of money.
Old surf magazines have been found as evidence to prove Ugg boots were already big by 1970, not just in Australia.
The more we can show that people in America were using the word Ugg in a generic sense, the better our case. So what we've been trying to do is using, obviously, Brian Smith's book to identify particular places and times that Ugg boots were advertised in a generic sense and getting copies of those advertisements.
In fact, Australians have been making Ugg boots for decades. Just ask Graham Spencer in South Australia. He says his father Charlie invented the very first Ugg boots in Australia back in the 60s, and he still has his father's very first pattern.
The original, still got them, and there it is. The original Ugg boot, the one that we sold thousands of.
Not only that, Graham Spencer says it was his father who invented the name Ugg boots.
A customer of his came in and said, "They're the ugliest boots she had ever seen." And he said, "That's it, we can't call them ugly," and he just came up with UGG.
The name was even registered in Adelaide in 1971 by John Arnold, the local surf shop owner who bought most of Charlie Spencer's boots.
Because people were trying to knock him off with UGH, UG, and that's when he actually registered the name UGG in 1971 here in Adelaide, and it's in the courts here in 1971. It was registered by him.
South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon says there's more at stake than just Ugg boots. He wants legislation to set up industry trademarks to protect even generic names like Ugg or Barramundi.
This is a battle worth having. If the French can protect the use of the name Champagne, the Greeks the use of the word feta, then surely Australia can protect the use of the word Ugg for Australian manufacturers.
Lawyers for Deckers and Brian Smith won't respond to questions from the ABC, but they argue the word Ugg has never been a generic term anywhere, and they say the fraud claims have been raised before but lack merit. But if Eddie Oiger wins his case, the Ugg name will be open to all Ugg boot makers, and Australian companies will be able to export them for the first time in decades.
Deckers would no longer have the right to exclude competitors who are using the word Ugg in America.
We'll have a market of 350 million people to supply potential customers in the United States.
Eddie Oiger is also taking action against Deckers in Australia. He's alleged the company is guilty of deceptive conduct by using the name Ugg Australia when its boots are in fact made in China. He's also asked the Competition and Consumer Commission to investigate its website, which warns consumers not to buy so-called fakes, even implying they're funded by terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda.
If it was proven that Uggs Australia aren't the only supposedly real Ugg boot, then people might start coming back to us and the original Ugg boot makers.
I believe in the Ugg boots that we made in Australia. I want to employ more people. I want us to be able to export, have a fair playing field out there.
Anne Barker with that ongoing battle. There are millions of people around the world applying for refugee status, but determining who is or isn't really at risk is left up to the countries they settle in. Sometimes it's not a straightforward answer, particularly when the threat comes from a little understood cultural practice. Simon Royal has one woman's story, and just a warning, some viewers may find the content of this story confronting.
The Adelaide Central Market's quite close. It's a few blocks from my work. It's very close to the legal precinct, so a lot of lawyers base themselves there and have lunch and coffees after they've gone to court.
Immigration lawyer Jane McGrath and her client have had their day in court. Now it's time for coffee.
Yes, thank you.
But things did not go well, so this cup is more about commiseration than celebration.
She's very nervous with what she's going to have to go through with immigration and their intention to remove her back to Kenya. She just can't go. She's terrified.
It is traumatizing. Very, very traumatizing. I'm having sleepless nights. I can't sleep.
Originally from Kenya, the young woman wants to be known as Phoebe. She's been here on a student visa, which has expired. The Refugee Review Tribunals refused a protection visa. Phoebe fears returning to Kenya would see her forced into a degrading, dangerous procedure known as female genital mutilation, or FGM.
They usually say is, if a woman does not go through this, is a prostitute. You are there to take other people's men. So they do this to eliminate the chances and the likelihood of you doing that.
Despite being outlawed in many nations, including Kenya, FGM is still practiced, shielded by local politics and tradition.
It's about power and control and how we treat women, and that is universal. FGM is just one manifestation of gender inequality.
Khadija Blas speaks from first-hand experience. It was done to her when she was 9, just before leaving Sierra Leone to come to Australia. In some countries, Khadija Blah's opposition to FGM could cost her life, so she does not spare the details.
And she grabbed hold of what I now know to be my clitoris. Interesting that it doesn't even have a name in my language, but it's so hated. She grabbed hold of it, and then she started cutting away, inch by inch. I screamed, I shouted, I passed out, I woke up, struggled to get my mother off me while I screamed in pain because this woman was butchering me down there.
Khadija Blah believes a thorough Australian investigation of FGM refugee protection claims would pressure other governments to stamp it out. But QC Felicity Gerry says Phoebe's case demonstrates Australian authorities often don't understand what FGM is and why it survives.
There's a huge lack of awareness amongst all the judiciary that requires significant training. I've certainly been involved in that in Australia, and it is improving, but at the moment I think you can say that from the judgments that are coming out there is still a perception that it's quite simple for a woman to say no and then it won't happen, which is not the reality.
The tribunal described Phoebe's evidence as inconsistent. Crucially, it did not accept her claim that a cousin in a criminal gang known to support FGM put her at particular risk. But in its findings, the tribunal also made broader observations about FGM and Phoebe's people, the Kikuyu.
The tribunal does not accept that there is a real chance of serious harm for the reasons of her membership of the social groups of Kikuyu women, young Kikuyu women, or Kikuyu women who are not circumcised, or any combination.
For Glory Gatwiri, that reasoning is flawed. At Adelaide's Flinders University, the young Kenyan has just finished her PhD, investigating the health consequences of FGM. Not every Kikuyu woman will suffer FGM, but that's no indication of risk.
They have every right to deny a person a visa if they find that there are these inconsistencies. However, to claim that someone is not a risk as a blanket statement, I think it's a bit unfounded. If you're Kikuyu, you're definitely a risk.
You are at a high risk of having FGM done to you at one point in your life. Whether it's because your family believes in it, whether you then marry into a family that believes in it, or whether you end up in an area where they say you're not a woman enough because you haven't had FGM. Whatever the case is, it's always a constant threat.
Which is exactly what the tribunal found in another Kikuyu woman's case.
The tribunal accepts FGM is a traditional Kikuyu practice. The harm would be directed at her for the essential reason of her membership of a particular social group, Kikuyu women.
But in yet another case, the tribunal said this.
Female genital mutilation is not widely practiced in Kenya, and only 34% of women have been circumcised.
We asked the tribunal to discuss why shared facts between cases draw apparently contradictory conclusions. They declined but described FGM as repugnant. The tribunal treats every case separately on merit. Felicity Gerry argues that's part of the problem.
What we tend to do is investigate the individual who is making the application. We don't use investigative procedures that we would, for example, if she was a victim of crime. And yet the allegation is the same. She's saying that she's the victim of threats or harassment or some sort of potential criminal activity, and we simply don't take that extra step.
Those steps aren't just about Australia being a good international citizen. Khadija Blah says there are 83,000 women now living in this country who at some stage in their life have suffered some form of FGM. The practice, she says, has its supporters here.
Earlier this year, a Sydney man was jailed in Australia's first domestic FGM prosecution. For the women speaking out against it, that's one more reason to keep campaigning.
It is also very important that women like me speak up, because until you have lived through something like FGM, it's hard to comprehend why an act that affects 200 million women and girls today is so polarizing. It's not.
Simon Royal in Adelaide with one woman's very personal story. Students rehearsing here at the Sydney Conservatorium of Music. Whether it's a front seat at a performance or a busker on the street, music is a powerful force to get us moving, to make us happy, or to even evoke a memory. And in places like aged care centres and hospitals, it can make an absolute difference. Bob Lawrence spent World Music Therapy Day at Glenside Health Service Centre in Adelaide.
I thought this session I would just play a little bit for you and then basically see if we can sort of start creating music straight away using looping pedals. They're called looping pedals because you use
Today is the celebration of World Music Therapy Day. I've invited Adam Page in to share the day with us.
You can record something, anything into it, and then it will play back. Record something, anything into it, and then it will play back. Record, and then you can basically go over the top of the last one.
I just think from his work, it's very much akin to the way I work. He's very spontaneous, has a lot of fun.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating a spontaneous composition, okay, from the ground up.
I'm hoping that it will give an opportunity for everyone to have an individual voice and for us to make something together as a team as well. When I listen to Adam perform, I have a feeling of being on the edge of my seat, not sure what will happen next. So what is he doing? What's going on? And that's the feeling that I want people to have here. To be really present in the moment, to be excited about just being alive, senses all working, to get out of the lethargy, the brain fog, and to have some fun, to appreciate each other, to listen, to share. Adam's a pretty cool dude. I think he'll go down well, we'll see.
I've been playing music for 25 years now and studied saxophone at the Elder Conservatorium here in Adelaide. Yes. I've been dabbling in all the other instruments for many years now.
All right. What's your name again, mate? Nick. I think it's time we jam. I think it's just time we jam.
More recently I've been composing for the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, Adelaide Symphony Orchestra, and now possibly music therapy. Why not? I find music to be incredibly therapeutic in my own life, and I know that that music can heal, and music has healed for thousands of years.
It's quite different from music for entertainment or music for education. What we do is about the person and their particular individual needs and how music can promote their functioning and their well-being. When people are suffering from schizophrenia, they have a whole range of symptoms that are very distressing and really can damage their quality of life. For example, they may hear voices, or they may have very confused ideas about what's real or what's not real. They may have delusions, and they may also just become very flat and blunted, we say, where they're not as emotionally alive, not as enjoying life as much. So a lot of my work is about reconnecting, using music interests as a bridge to reconnect them with the community and their interests about where they would go to hear the music that they like. Music stimulates some of the same brain pathways as other sources of pleasure in our lives, and it's a very safe way to lift our mood and get some energy.
Can I just pop these headphones on you?
Yeah. Music therapy is used around Australia quite widely in lots of different situations.
You ready?
When you play the right music to someone with dementia, for example, then music restores their personality, their functioning, their sociability. I saw this a lot working with elderly people. that if I found the right music for someone, they would sing, and for a little while afterwards they would chat quite coherently, and then they would slip back into their confusion. In Parkinson's disease, you see people, the brain is not functioning in terms of coordination and flow. But when they hear a song that they like and that's the right tempo and rhythm, they can get moving with a beautiful flow and gait. They can walk or dance. And similarly with people with the stroke, if they are affected in the way that they can't speak anymore, they can often still sing. And there are a number of choirs setting up for people to enjoy singing after they've had a stroke. And I guess brain scans have become a lot more advanced in recent years, and we're starting to get a better understanding of how the brain processes music and what effects it has. It's one of the few activities that really engages the entire brain. A lot of things we've observed in music therapy over many years and couldn't explain, and people think it's magical. Well, it's starting to make sense now. We can explain in scientific terms.
It was definitely an enlightening moment today on quite a few occasions actually, especially those moments where there was, interaction and everyone was kind of in the same space, musically. When the workshop began, I did notice that there was some sort of blank looks, like, what's going on here? But, sure enough, after 5 or so minutes, it got more comfortable in the room, and by the end, there was a dance party. And it just happened organically as well. I think the more comfortable people became, the easier it was to make music together. It's fantastic.
That beautiful story from Adelaide by Bob Lawrence. How do you keep culture alive? It's a question plaguing Indigenous communities around Australia. One group of elders in Geraldton, Western Australia, decided to organise a camp out in the hope of passing on knowledge to the younger generations and of keeping traditional practices alive. ABC Open's Chris Lewis went along.
Just being out here, I just love it. I just really love it.
We're drawn to the bush. You just feel that it's hard to explain. When we came here, my little grandson said, "Oh, Nana," he said, "there's no TV. I want to go back home." And after that, they started playing around and TV wasn't mentioned again. They just have been full on in everything they've done here. So it's been just so beautiful. They don't miss the TV at all.
Spending time with Elvie, Myra, Mavis, it's just been really wonderful. Following footsteps that they would have, trod when they were little kids, and talking about the things that they did when they were growing up around here, and seeing all the things that they're passing on to the kids, and seeing how excited the kids are just to learn it in the space that it's happening as well.
Well, my favourite part about today was going to look for the potatoes, bush potatoes.
It was good, learning how to find where the bush potato is and how to dig it up. And
I learnt that you can find food in the ground, and I learnt how to find the food.
Mashed potatoes tonight.
They got a better idea now when they can spot something, and they know that their ancestors used to live off all that, and now, they don't have to live off it, but it's good to know it. Yeah.
What I observed was their enjoyment of being out there in the bush area. I'm sure they're never going to forget it. And one of the littlest grannies, and my sister, "I don't want to go home. I want to come back here, So my sister said, "Yes, so do I."
it just makes you feel like, you come home sort of thing. It is home. It is Barna. which is ground that we belong to.
There are things that you see out on this country that you'll never ever see where we live in Geraldton. When you come out bush here, everything fits into place, everything complements each other, and it really just is just so comforting out here.
We caught our guial, cooked that up. The kids got to experience that for the first time, you know, for them, and they were pretty amazed, you know, they really enjoyed it. I don't think they're going to want to go home.
Yeah, they'll end up losing their culture and losing themselves. You know, their culture will be social media.
I want them to actually feel the same way I do, so that when they're old enough they can bring their children out, teach them and show them the same things that my parents taught me, that it can be passed on, because you can see the kids now how they've enjoyed this weekend. You know, when we get back they're going to be saying, Nana, when are we going again? So, you know, they'll want to come back out again, you know, no TVs. So yeah, but it's been very, very special.
I just hope they stay with their culture and stay strong, and I think putting it sort of in front of everything else, but you know, being with the other world at the same time, you know, just makes you strong inside. So without your culture, you're not, you know, you haven't got much at all. So yeah.
I really hope that these kids will be able to sit around that campfire one day and they'll be telling their kids now, come on, you tell a story about when you were a kid. And they'll be sitting up talking about, remember that time when we went out bush with Nan and Auntie and we caught that guial and we went out and looked for all the bush food, and yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And to see them, the kids grow up and want to bring their grannies out here and come back to this same place that their ancestors sat and their ancestors told these same stories. So that's really what we're looking for here.
ABC Open's Chris Lewis bringing us some gorgeous shots of WA. That's all from Australia Wide this week. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and don't forget you can catch any of our stories on ABC iView or on our website. I'm Yasmin Abdul Majid. See you next week for Australia Wide.